After the death of Avatar Roshi, a new avatar was born into the Air Nomads. After running away from the Air Nomads, he was trapped in ice for 100 years, not fulfilling his duty to bring balance to the world. After this 100 years, Sokka and Katara found him. He then learned all 4 elements and mastered them, and finally had his showdown with Fire Lord Ozai and defeated him by taking away his bending. Aang lived a happy life and had 3 children, before he finally passed away and the new avatar was born into the Water Tribe, an avatar named Korra. Korra learned all 4 elements and mastered them. In addition to this, Korra learned Metalbending, something no avatar before her was able to do, becoming the first metal-bending avatar of all time. When comparing Korra and Aang's hand-to-hand combat, it becomes clear that Korra has a significant advantage to Aang. Aang always seems to fall back on his bending rather than laying a hand on anyone. This could be an innate trait due to him being an air nomad and not being inclined to violence and hand-to-hand combat, but Korra seems to have a real knack for it and definitely takes the edge in hand-to-hand combat. When looking at Avatar Aang's airbending, it's clear to see that he has a natural talent for it. This is no surprise, him being born into the Air Nomads and most of his early childhood and most of the first book / first series, he was mainly just airbending, never having a natural affinity for the other elements like Korra. You can see that he has a natural talent for airbending even once he learns all the elements and masters all the elements. He always falls back on his airbending, relying on that more than the other 3 elements. In comparison, was able to master all elements except air. And not until she was in her late teens was she able to learn airbending from Tenzin. And even then it was so hard for her to produce any sort of air at all. I give Avatar Aang the advantage in airbending. When comparing Avatar Korra and Avatar Aang's waterbending, it's very tricky to decide who has a more in-depth knowledge of waterbending as a whole. Now, both of them show impressive feats of waterbending throughout their series. Avatar Aang being trained by Katara most of the way through the season and learning how to convert it into ice and using it in really unique and different ways. Korra being from the Water Tribe, innately having waterbending since a very young age. And I think I can't give any definitive edge in waterbending alone. I think if these 2 avatars were to waterbend against each other, it would just end up in a stalemate. So I'm going to give no edge for waterbending. In terms of earthbending, this has a very clear winner. As I mentioned earlier, Korra was able to uplift her earthbending to the next stage, to the 2nd tier, and do metal bending, something Aang never shows in any source. Aang's earthbending was good and he was trained by Toph, arguably the greatest earthbender of all time. However, his earthbending was slow. Earthbenders of old would stand still and stand their ground, as Toph would say. Whereas as Bolin would let us know in the first season of Korra, to be a pro bender and to do very quick earthbending, you have to be very quick on your feet, ready to move, ready to dodge. Earthbenders were very reliant, especially earthbenders old, very reliant on standing still and being able to endure the storm. Whatever's thrown at them, they would block, they wouldn't dodge whereas Earthbenders of new seem to dodge, and even Metalbenders seem to show it a lot of dodging and parrying and moving around a lot more than some you see in Avatar Aang's series. I think that if you compare them to just on Earthbending, Aang would do Toph's teachings and mainly stand still, endure what's coming at you. He may engage rock armor, which is pretty classic of Aang. However, Korra has the distinct advantage. Being trained to be a pro bender, she could throw small bits of rock at him, ducking and diving and weaving. And on top of that, she's got metal bending, something Aang lacks. For Earthbending, I give the definitive edge to Avatar Korra. When comparing Firebending, Avatar Aang has a very reluctance to use Firebending after burning Katara at an early stage in the series. Now, he says he doesn't want to hurt anyone and he never wants to use Firebending again until the dragons sort of relight, excuse the pun, his fire for it and show him it's about light, not about damage and hurting people. However, you can see quite clearly when he's fully realised Avatar, and even when he's in the Avatar state, he has such a reluctance to using Firebending, relying on the other three elements so much more than his Firebending. Also for Aang, fire was one of the hardest things for him to learn, even though Earth was his direct opposite. And to start with, he found that quite tricky. Fire, I would say, in my opinion, was his hardest challenge to overcome. Now, as for Korra, she had no such weakness. At a young age, she was able to earth, water and firebend, and has always been a physical being who just has a natural talent for firebending and continues to use it, even when we see her all grown up. Some of the bending she's using mainly is firebending, mainly because she likes that aggressive style, going for the punches and the physical kicks and including her bending into that. Neither Avatar was able to take it to the next level and do lightning and be able to produce lightning, which I think is a bit of a shame because I would like to have seen Korra do lightning, or maybe Aang later in his life learning lightning, especially since they had Zuko and Mako who could both lightning bend. I don't quite understand why they didn't have any inclination to learn it. Who knows? But I have to say here that Avatar Korra gets the distinctive edge on firebending. When comparing the Avatar state between both avatars, it's clear that both of them didn't have a natural take to it straight away, only going into it when being forced or getting really angry or when the circumstances needed them to get to the Avatar state. When they both became fully realised avatars, it was clear that Aang enjoyed using the Avatar state a lot more than Korra. Once he come to terms with what the Avatar state was, that it wasn't this aggressive being that could be used to devastate everything in the path. It was actually used to stop evil. And Aang uses it perfectly against Fire Lord Ozai. He uses it absolutely perfectly, and I never see Korra use it in that same way. Aang had all four elements around him, even condensing rocks down so that they would be harder, and then shooting them like bullets at Fire Lord Ozai. You never see Korra doing something similar to this. Once Avatar Aang decides to let go, and he lets go of Katara, and he becomes to the Avatar state, he seems to have more of a mastery of it than Korra. Korra has had issues with the Avatar state throughout, with Zahir's poison blocking her from seeing her past avatars, but she has more of a reluctance to use it. And although I agree that Korra seems to have a greater magnitude of power when using the Avatar state, such as her battle with Zahir when she takes half that mountain, cuts it in half and then just throws it at Zahir, she doesn't have that refinement and that control that Avatar Aang has. I would think that someone who could condense rocks down and then fire them like bullets had more control of the avatar state than someone who could take the top of the mountain off and throw it. Korra had no precision, no control, and I know in this one circumstance she was under the poison. She was angry. She was really angry at Zahir. However, she just doesn't seem to display much control in any of her avatar states compared to Avatar Aang. And if it was a battle of just avatar state, I would say that Aang would have the distinct advantage. All the way through this matchup, I've been saying she's got the physical side of the avatar. Aang has the spiritual side. If it was a battle of just hand-to-hand combat, Korra would hands down defeat Aang. However, if it was a battle of meditating or linking to the spirit realm, Aang so easily would have the advantage. How easily he goes in and out of the spirit realm at such a young age, whereas Korra's never able to do that until much, much later. It seems like when the writers were making these two avatars, they wanted Korra to be different to Aang, and the way they made her different was they made her more physically in tune to the elements. However, her spiritual side was a lot less. And being that the avatar state is linked to your spiritual link, to your past lives, I have to give Aang the advantage for being in the avatar state. Now for the verdict. This was quite a tricky matchup to have, and although some of you might already have your winner in your head, I have been tossing between winners and looking at lots of different sources to find evidence to see who would beat the other. Now, I would just like to say that I'm taking Korra from the end of book 4 and Aang from the end of book 3. And I think if they had a battle at that point, I believe that Aang would win if, and this is the big if, Aang would win if they both used Avatar state and went into the Avatar state. I believe Aang has such better control, mobility, than Korra in the Avatar state. Korra is very, very obvious in her moves when she's in the Avatar state, being so direct and just trying to get that power out. Whereas Aang is very precise, easily mobile, and very refined. And if it was a battle of Avatar states, I would say Aang would definitely win this versus series hands down. However, I'm going to be excluding the Avatar state for this matchup, as I think it is unfair to include something that involves all your past lives and not really a proper showing of your own skills as an avatar. So excluding the Avatar state, looking at a matchup between them, I would have to say that Avatar Korra would win. Everything is in Avatar Korra's corner for this. If we look at Waterbending, they're on par. None of them defeat the other in Waterbending. They're about on par. Firebending, they're about on par with each other. Korra having a natural affinity for it, Aang reluctant to use it. So even a tiny edge could be given to Korra in Firebending. Nothing significant, but she is more willing to use it. Airbending, Aang obviously has the significant advantage. Korra never being able to produce airbending until a very, very late time in her life compared to the other three that came so naturally. So obviously Aang gets the edge for his airbending, but in terms of earthbending, Korra gets the advantage. She's got Metalbending. She's much quicker using her pro-bending. And this might link to the other elements such as waterbending and firebending as well. She's much quicker on her feet. But Aang is a natural airbender, so he's also very quick on his feet, except when he's using earthbending. And then hand-to-hand combat, Korra has the advantage. She is more willing to use her fists, whereas Aang is not. And I think if you put them in a head-to-head battle, I believe Avatar Korra would come out on top. Now, this is all just my opinion. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you think Aang would have had the advantage against Korra? I'd love to know. Try not to get too bent out of shape if Avatar Aang is your favourite avatar. Personally, I prefer Aang to Korra in terms of personality. However, I'm just going by my interpretation of the lore, and I honestly think that Aang would have the advantage in the Avatar state, but Korra, I believe, is the stronger Avatar as a whole. But like I said, let me know what you think in the comments below. Make sure to like the video if you want to see more Avatar Versus series. Let me know suggestions in the comments below, and you never know, I might pick it and do a video on it. And of course, subscribe, be the first to get all these videos straight to your sub box. And as always, have a great anime afternoon.
Join the Dead Anime Club today by subscribing or clicking on #deaddiligent to see all the latest updates. I also stream anime games on /deaddiligent on Twitch, so feel free to check that out. Also join the Google Plus group on /deaddiligent. Why not watch another video? But before you go, don't forget to comment and like. Thanks guys for watching, and as always, have a great anime afternoon. 5 anime you should watch on Halloween. All that after this.